right, good morning. We'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to break up the fellowship, but I didn't say that. So start off with prayer requests. I'm going to go through my list, and then you can tell me what we need to change or delete or whatever. I've got Dave Durr on here. Glad to see you're out of the hospital, sir. Praying for Danny, still praying for John and Fran. Ron, good to see you back as well. Praying for Tony, Michael Bintner's mom with cancer, Rebecca Buckley, Brian Pitts, Harper Samansky. She was supposed to have surgery in April. Is that still?
They don't know anymore.
Okay.
Take that off until further notice.
Okay. Still praying for Hazel, Carolyn Robinson Jackson, Chuck's sister. Praying for Diane. Praying for Chip Hughes, Natalie's cousin. Josh's mom, who's battling cancer. Carrie's coworker Anita, undergoing chemo. Still praying for Hillard's wife Karma, and it's good to see Hillard back here as well. He's almost ready to run laps. Charlie Bias, Marie Pitts, Nicole Schmidt. I think we're still praying for Chuck's aunt Margaret Davis in hospice care. April's neighbor Aaron, praying for Goldie. Mike Howard is still recovering from surgery on a broken leg and ankle. Rebecca, according to her latest Facebook post, seems to be doing well, or better. Sarah has asked us to pray for Priscilla and her faith questions. Is she still traveling?
She's not.
Okay, so she's back, and that's good. She has safe travels. Graydon's cousin Ronald Miller. Mackenzie Duncan, recovering from a broken arm. Liam had asked to pray for his grandpa Jay with prostate cancer. Ralph's brother Ron, who's on hospice still. Okay. Emmy, the granddaughter of friends of John and Paula. Natalie had asked for a family friend to be, we were praying for one of your family friends. Brandy's dad's health, and also Estelle, who was in the hospital and also lost his wife. Keep praying for the family of Carla Holton, Judy's in-law. Bethany Etz was a friend of Josh's. Sarah had a friend that was seeking a medical diagnosis. Chuck was awaiting some test results. And then Pat Purdy. What else? Carrie.
My friend Anita, she's having surgery on April 22nd, so next week.
Okay.
She'll be off work for an extended period also. So.
Okay. What else? Josh?
A week from Wednesday, I'm having a medical test.
Okay. Week from Wednesday?
Yep.
Okay. What else? Sandy?
Tammy and Devin had a small fire at their house, and just praise God that everyone is safe and the house didn't burn down.
Okay. Baby's okay?
Yeah, everybody was out safe.
Good. Okay. What else? Okay, let's pray. Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you, God, for just the ability we have to come and worship you and to study your word and do so without fear. Lord, I pray that you will be with us as we worship. Help us to focus on you. Lord, help us to put aside the things of the world that may be on our heart and mind and just give you our all. God, I pray that you will be with us as we study from your book of Romans today. I pray that you'll open our hearts and our minds. I pray that you'll be with me, that I'll recall the things I've studied. God, I pray that you will just help us to allow your words to penetrate our heart and our soul and allow the Spirit to work through us, Lord, as we deal with people, whether it's in the church family or whether it's in the world. God, I pray that you'll be with those folks who are hurting, who are on our prayer list, Lord. Lord, you know who those folks are. Lord, I pray that you'll be with each situation, that you'll help them to, if they're in the hospital, help them to recover, help the doctors to be with them. Lord, if they are missing a loved one, I pray that you'll give them comfort, give them strength. Lord, I pray that you'll be with each situation, that in each situation, Lord, your hand will be at work and that we can be your hands and your feet. And Lord, I just pray that you will just help us, Lord, to look to you for guidance in everything that we do. God, I pray that you will be with those who are suffering loss. You give them comfort, Lord, and help them to look for the good in each situation. God, I pray that you'll be with those folks from our congregation who are hurting, that you'll give them comfort, Lord, and help us to see a need and to work to fix it, Lord. Lord, forgive us when we fall short. Help us to grow each day and to be better each day. Help us each day to become more like Jesus. And Lord, when we don't, I pray that you'll forgive us. Lord, I thank you for everything you bless us with, and most especially for your Son, who died and rose for us, Lord, and who gives us hope. And Lord, we look forward to that hope. We look forward to him coming back. And Lord, I pray all this through your Son's name. Amen. All right, so thank you, Andrew, for covering last week. I know that was not an easy lesson for him to cover. I appreciate you all not being too difficult on him with your questions. And today we're going to look at chapter 15, probably maybe through verses 1 through 13. But as we look at this is the culmination of what Paul's talking about since chapter 14, verse 1. And this idea is accepting other Christians, not on matters of doctrine, but on matters of opinion. And the emphasis in this specific section is on unity in the church and how the church can bring glory and honor to God. And there's only one way this happens. I'm just cutting straight to the chase. The only way this happens, as Paul is going to develop, is by walking in the footsteps of Jesus. I don't mean to say it and make it too simple, but it's that simple. If we walk in Jesus' footsteps, we can achieve unity. Let's look first and we look at chapter 15. If somebody would read verses 1 through 4 for us.
We men who are strong ought to bear the scruples of the weak, and not to please ourselves. Let each of us please his neighbor for his good, leading to edification. For even Christ did not please himself, but as it is written, the reproaches of those who reproached you fell on me. For whatever things were written before were written for our learning, that we through the patience and comfort of the scriptures might have hope.
Thanks, Robert. So Paul starts with that word now, indicating his thoughts from chapter 14 continue. And he says, we who are strong. Who are the strong again in chapter 14? Sandy pointed it out 2 weeks ago. He never actually says this certain group of people. So he never says the Jews are strong. He never says the Gentiles are strong. How does he identify the strong in chapter 14? 2 specific examples.
Over small matters.
Well, specifically in chapter 14, he gives 2 specifics. One starts with an M, the other starts with a D.
Mature.
Meat. Remember this? Were you guys here for chapter 14, or is it not going to bring Andrew back in here? I know I taught it too. The first argument, the first example was people who decide not to eat meat. Vegans, do you remember this from the first 6 verses of chapter 14? Do we need to get up and do jumping jacks? Okay. Those who eat meat and those who say you can't eat meat because it might have been sacrificed to idols. That was the first issue that he talked about. And as I covered a couple of times, and I know Andrew covered this, he never specifically says it was one group or the other that was saying meat was bad. It's important to note that, because it could have been Jews, could have been Gentiles. Then there's the other example about the days of the week. Some of you think specific days are important, and others of you say, what's the difference from one day to the other? Again, It's easy for us to go and say, well, he's talking about the Jews, but Gentiles and their pagan worship in that culture also had specific days of the week that were important. Okay? So in these matters, he's using these two matters that must have been dividing the church, but he never says this group is strong, this group is weak. So I'll go back to my question. Who were the strong in those examples? Don't look for a people group. How did he identify them, Luann?
The ones who are not overly critical.
Okay.
Didn't criticize it, they showed love.
Well,
They didn't,
that's definitely a characteristic of a strong brother, but in those two examples of eating meat and days of the week, was the strong brother the one who said, I can eat meat from anywhere? Or was the strong brother the one who said, I can't eat that meat because it might have been sacrificed to an idol? Larry?
Either side would be correct if they're operating from
Answer,
faith.
nope, I'm going to treat you like a client. In this example, who is the strong brother? The one who says it's okay to eat meat of any kind, or the one who says, I can't eat that because it might have been sacrificed to an idol?
If they are doing it through faith, either one of them could be right.
Nope.
neither says can't.
Neither.
The one,
And Dave says neither.
I say the one that says they can't.
Let's go back and look at chapter 14. Let's go back and look at chapter 14. All right, so we're looking back at verse 3. The one who eats is not to regard with contempt the one who does not eat, and the one who does not eat, is not to judge the one who eats, for God has accepted him. So, who's the strong brother? The one who doesn't judge. Okay? Who else is the strong brother? There's a lot of confusion here. Verse 3 answers this, I think. Andrew.
Verse 2, one person has faith that he may eat all things, but the one who is weak eats only vegetables.
Okay. So, I think Larry was roundabout getting there. I think Dave nailed this on the head, right? Can we argue that they're both strong? Can we argue that they're both weak? What's my point? At some point, each of us can be strong, can be weak. Do you think of yourself that way?
Well, it says God accepts us.
He does.
So, I mean, who are we to argue?
He does. But here's the problem with this, Paula. What was happening in the church in Rome? Why did Paul have to write this? Was it God having trouble accepting us? What was the problem? Somebody said no. They were having trouble accepting each other.
So that's what I'm saying. Why should we fight him?
That's the whole point of what Paul's writing. But the question is, why should we fight him? Why do we continue to fight him?
Some people are stupid. She's not wrong.
I cannot disagree with that statement. I say that probably once a day.
And I'm sure she said it in a loving manner.
No judgment. No judgment.
But here's what I want you to notice, all right? Moving from stupid people. Go back to chapter 15 and verse 1. There's something interesting here that I caught for the very first time studying this. Do you notice who Paul identifies himself with?
Christ.
Strong. Graydon, read the verse. What's he say?
Now we who are strong ought to bear the weaknesses of those without strength and not just please ourselves.
Right. So when Paul writes this, he's saying, we who are strong. So Paul here identifies himself with the strong. How does that strike you?
I think you said it correctly, in my opinion.
Thank you.
There's things that I feel strong in, there's things that I don't feel strong in, that I feel weak in, you know?
Yeah.
So I think it depends on what you're talking about, you know? I may not have an issue with, we'll do an easy one, what people are wearing at church, you know?
All right.
Do you have a tie on or do you have jeans? I honestly don't care. It doesn't bother me either way, so.
Okay.
That I may be strong in and may be able to encourage those that are frustrated with, but there are other things that I can't be strong in.
Well said, Carrie. Now, in thinking about this, and this is why this is such a difficult passage, because we can be strong in one place and weak in another, but here Paul identifies himself with the strong, and then do you notice that he places the heavier responsibility on the strong brother? Why would he do that?
They're strong.
Yeah, but does strong always necessarily mean better?
Strong just means you have a bigger responsibility to put yourself in check.
Okay. Natalie?
Are we missing the caveat to all of it, though, where he says, for God? Like, if you are choosing to eat meat because you believe that that is for God, that is your belief, the person who's not eating meat, not if they're worshiping an idol, but if they're saying, hey, I'm not going to eat meat on Fridays because I believe it's a sacrifice for God, that's their belief, and we're not to judge them for that if their intentions are correct.
Okay.
Is that part of this?
I said that's a big part before I go further. Hillard?
In that verse 1, the Apostle Paul is wondering why he is strong is because he's not judging. And he's looking back at the other. If you're not judging, then you're strong.
Yeah.
Whether you eat or whether you don't eat.
Paul is not putting himself in a position where he's judging because he's remembering this caveat. Do you see that connection there? The stronger brother or sister is saying it's easier, not saying, but it's easier for the strong to change without offending their conscience than it is the weak. He's emphasizing the responsibility that he's outlining here is not optional. If the strong desire to obey the Lord, they have to do this. I mean, think about this. What debt does the strong brother or sister owe the weak brother or sister? Just based on this, just looking just simply at verse 1. And I don't like to always just narrow it down like this, but looking at verse 1, what debt does the strong owe the weak? Forbearance. For people who don't use that word a lot, Ralph, what do you mean? Okay, hold that thought. I'll come back to you in a second, Brandy. So forbearance means to, and in this context, in this Greek word, this isn't beating someone over the head. This isn't tolerating them. This is someone who carries or supports someone. He wrote in Galatians 6:2, bear with one another's burdens and thereby fulfill the law of Christ. The best I could come up with, this is a father holding the hand of a child, teaching them to walk, teaching them to go up and down stairs, or a grown child holding on to their aged parents and helping them to find their seat. That's this bearing with one another, bearing the weaknesses of those. What else, Brandy? Acceptance. What do you mean by that?
The strong brother or sister accepting or taking into consideration the weaknesses of another and being supportive of those weaknesses.
I'm not picking on you, but I'm going to. When you're shopping and Robert's with you and he's not keeping up because you have that goal, or maybe because you're just browsing, is it easy to tolerate him because he's not keeping up with you? Or do you get a little frustrated sometimes, and it won't be held against you? I'm going to take that smile as a yes. Sometimes, and all of you can identify with this, sometimes we can look at somebody and say, you're holding me back, you're slowing me down. You ever done that?
All the time.
Okay. Yeah, that's real, Carrie. At work sometimes. But a person who's accepting and loving of their brother or sister will look at them and say, and I don't mean this in a haughty way, I've been given this strength so I can help those who are not. So I can help them to keep going. Sometimes my stride has to match that of the weaker brother or sister to help them on their journey. So there's that acceptance. There's that love that Paul's talking about here. Because he says, bear the weaknesses of those without strength. And then he says one other thing in this verse. You're not to please yourself. One of the most powerful human traits is our desire to please ourselves. I want to eat what I want. I want to go where I want. I want to do what I want. The goal of the worldly minded person is do whatever pleases them. But the aim of the strong brother is not to please myself. Sometimes the strong brother, I shouldn't say some, oftentimes the strong brother has to say, how can I forego my personal pleasure for the good of others? How can I'm going to say I'm not going to do that if it's going to cause this person to struggle. I'm not going to do this even though I know I can if it builds this person up. Baby cries in the middle of the night. Mom or dad, do you just ignore that baby and go back to sleep? Probably not. You probably give up your good pleasure, that warm bed, that good night's sleep to get up and take care of that baby's need. Larry?
Okay, I'm gonna throw a thorn in here.
I figured you would.
Okay.
You had that look in your eyes.
Now, we're talking about eating, let's just use the example of eating meat.
Yep.
Now, if you go someplace else and this person says, hey, I don't believe in eating meat, you're strong, you say, okay, I won't eat meat when I'm there. Okay? You're the strong person.
Yep.
Now, let's flip that. A person who does not believe they should eat meat goes to somebody's house and they have meat. Now, how do they be the strong person? If they're going against their faith and saying, oh, well, because he's weaker, I'll go ahead and eat the meat, they're going against their faith. Now, how can they be the strong person?
Well, I don't know that applies because in this example, the strong person doesn't think there's anything wrong with eating meat.
Okay, but if
so they wouldn't be the stronger, they would be the weaker going to the house of the stronger.
If the stronger person says that you can be the strong person whether you believe in eating meat or not.
In this example, you can. In this example in chapter 14, the strong brother, Paul specifically is saying, and I think if you study the commentaries, and I know that I said you can be a stronger or weaker brother depending on the situation, but in this specific example, the stronger brother in chapter 14 is the one who eats meat and sees nothing wrong with whether or not it was potentially sacrificed, because they also apply what Paul said in 1 Corinthians where he said that those sacrifices of those pagan gods mean nothing, and I'm paraphrasing right now. So in the meat example, the strong person is the one who has no problem eating meat. The weaker person is the one who says, that might have been sacrificed at a pagan temple, so I can't eat that. That's the example here. So to flip it too much is going to confuse the chapter, and I don't want to do that. But think of a different example.
Like celebrating, I feel like for us, maybe it might be like celebrating holidays in a certain way.
Okay.
You know, like the stronger person might be able to celebrate a holiday in a in a way that isn't unbiblical, but like the weaker brother might say, no, we can't do that.
Okay?
So how do we deal with that?
You tell me.
I'm trying to like flesh this out in my mind in modern day context and things I would actually like deal with myself.
Well, I think Paul gives more answer the further we go. Natalie?
Kind of, not an answer, but a response maybe, is, and as I'm learning this, being new to Church of Christ, Bible-based, right? Does it say it? Does it not say it? There's not really mention of holidays necessarily like we have them today, because most of them are man-made. So we can't really back up if it's to be done or not to be done. So therefore we can't judge those who do or don't do what they're believing in because it may not say. But in the Bible, like the Ten Commandments, it's, you shouldn't kill, right? I'm just going to use that example. So that is something, not that we could judge necessarily, but we could be the strong brother or sister and say, and talk to someone like, hey, you really shouldn't do that. But if it comes to a holiday, it's like, well, that's on you. Not my monkey, not my circus kind of thing.
So,
Well, that was a lot, sorry.
No, that's okay. I appreciate you saying that because you're identifying an issue that many people have. The issue is, and I'm saying this as one who looks at law every day. When we look at this simply as a law book, if it's there, it's there. If it's not, it's not. There's one thing that oftentimes gets missed. Grace. A lot of times when we look at this as just a manual, if it says this, then we're going to do this. If it doesn't say this, we're not going to do it. Oh, it doesn't say it, so I'm going to imply my opinion. That's where Paul's kicking in here, okay? And so that's where when we look at this too much as a legal rule book that's black and white, so when I go before a judge and say, Judge, that person, he didn't mean to get in that accident that caused that injury, but at that moment, the McDonald's worker who put the coffee in his hand and didn't put the lid on caused that lid to spill, got all over him, and he jerked the car, and judge is going to say, doesn't matter, he was driving. The law says black and white, it's his fault. And that's just a quick example, right? So that's where I think Paul is saying, got to have a little bit of grace. I think that's implied in the text. Did somebody else?
I got one thing. I think that something sums up in 22 where he says, whatever
15:22 or 14:22?
I'm in 14, sorry.
Okay.
Whatever you do, whatever you believe about these things, keep between yourself and God. And I believe that you can be with someone who differs from your beliefs. You can honor them. That doesn't mean that you agree with what they do. And they will know you by that. They will know you will come to my home and you will condemn me, or you will come and you will honor me and we will work together. And the condemning part, I think, is really what the crux of it is. I can love you, I can honor you, that does not believe I accept your beliefs. And there's a way of doing that. Excuse me.
Well, keep in mind, these are matters of opinion, right? Mm-hmm. He's not even discussing, this is not, none of chapter 14 and the first 13 verses are on a doctrinal issue such as baptism, okay? These are opinion. So maybe the best thing to do is to keep things to yourself, like he says in verse 22. We have a problem with that, though, don't we? Well, hold on, because Ron raised his hand.
Sorry. Sorry, Ron. That's a valid question.
Sometimes in life, we have to eat our words. I like to put a continuum on a board. At one end, I have judgment. The other end, I have humility. And every human being is on that continuum at some point in life, going back and forth. Our responsibility is to grow as Christians and strive to be on that humble side as much as we possibly can. And sometimes that means saying no, sometimes it means graduate seminar in theology, and when we take breaks, I get my cup of coffee. And before I say anything, don't mess with my cup of coffee. And I had another preacher come up to me, and he said, I feel compelled to tell you about the dangers of drinking coffee. And he's standing there holding a Diet Coke in his hand. Now, I'm not going to tell you what the chemicals in Diet Coke can do to your brain. But I looked at him and I said, thank you. And I smiled and I walked away drinking my coffee. A part of me wanted to engage him and respond. You know what's in that Diet Coke? But what good would that do? And a lot of times when that person, like this preacher, if you do respond, challenging them, that's what they want. They want to argue their point. Sometimes grace means eating your words and walking away.
Well said. And I think that answers Sarah's question. Before I do though, Hillard? Yes, sir?
I believe sometimes it's hard for us to look back at the situation that was the Gentiles and the Jews were going through. But I'm going to give an example of something today. We have congregations now that don't believe in eating in the building. And they make that a law. If they decide, elders decide they don't want to do it, that's fine. But when they start making it a doctrine issue, then that's a different thing.
Absolutely. That's the point here is, are we trying to make our opinions doctrine? Are we trying to enforce our opinion on somebody else? And when you bring that back to what Ron said, Sarah, I think that answers your question. The relationship question, the most recent one. How do we have a relationship with people? Why do we think we have to have in a relationship everybody has to agree? We don't.
It's just hard to have a relationship when it does, I guess.
Not really.
I just went right back to it.
You just state your words. Thank you.
Disagree. It's hard to how do you disagree and not get into it with somebody, or always agree? You're saying you don't always have to always agree, but then when you disagree, it feels like judgment. It feels like you're, stirring up trouble or stirring up strife.
Whose feeling is that?
It's mine.
Okay, there you go.
What about the other person if I'm trying to watch out for them?
Well, I'll give you an example. One of my best friends in Oklahoma is a Baptist. I don't usually call out other traditions, but one of my best friends in Oklahoma is a Baptist. He and I disagree on whether or not we can lose salvation. But if I went to Clay and said, Clay, I need you to pray for this, and I still do today, and he does this for me, he's going to pray for me. He's one of the most scripturally knowledgeable people that I know. He just doesn't get that one part. And I still love him.
But do you talk about those things?
All the time.
So it's
Every time we get together, we have that conversation because I'm trying to convince him and he's trying to convince me. That doesn't change my love for him because one day I'll have to answer and he'll have to answer. But I can still have that relationship with him where I rely on him to pray for me, knowing that his prayers are going before the same throne my prayers are going before. He just sees one thing differently than me. And I'm not going to put myself in God's place to say because he feels that way, he's going to hell. That's between him and God. And I can still have that relationship with him and share things with him that I can't share with other people because I know he's going to take it and take it seriously. And he does the same for me. So just because we don't see eye to eye on what I think is a pretty serious doctrinal issue, I still love and respect him because, as Paul was going to say here in chapter 15, that's what Christ does. The question that we should be asking ourselves when we're considering the needs of others is, how will my seeking what I want, personal pleasure, coffee, Diet Coke, affect somebody else? And that's the question that does not get asked in this world today. A whole lot. Right? And who does that attitude remind you of? Philippians chapter 2. Somebody go to Philippians 2. I'm going to skip a little bit ahead. But look at Philippians chapter 2, and somebody just read verses 6 through 8.
Who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on the cross.
Who does that remind you of asking this question? Jesus. Now, here's what really blows your mind. Go back to verse 2, where Paul continues this thought. He says, each of us is to please his neighbor for his good, to his edification. So Paul has identified himself in verse 1 as the strong brother. That's important to note, because now he says we're to please our neighbor. And when he says this, he's identifying the neighbor as the weaker brother. And he says we're to do that for the neighbor's good, to edify the neighbor. Now, we don't use that word a whole lot. To build that neighbor up. We're to be unselfish and more concerned about the welfare of our fellow Christians than we are our own. And the kicker is if our fellow Christians are taking that same mindset, that they're concerned about our welfare, now we've got a circular reference here, where we're each taking care of the other. The problem is, sometimes we hit the roadblock. You following me on this? But he says, build that neighbor up. One translation says, strengthen him and build him up spiritually. Another translation says, we are to help them become stronger Christians. Be like Christ. And Matt? I did?
Well, I didn't want to interrupt you. You called on me and you stopped talking.
I'm good.
Don't judge him.
I kind of feel like I did something rude right.
Stop judging me for calling on you.
Maybe this would help Sarah. At the beginning of 14, it says, as for the one who is weak in faith, don't quarrel over opinions. It doesn't start by saying, don't quarrel over opinions. So like me and you, we can, I don't like the word quarrel, but we can talk about opinions because you're not weak in faith.
Thank you.
So I think it's directed, and I think elsewhere, I forget who it was, maybe it was Paul that talks about, I can't feed you, or maybe it's Jesus that says, you're still drinking milk, or maybe I don't know.
Yeah.
You're still drinking milk, I can't, you're still at these elementary things. And so there are people that are weak in faith, and we shouldn't quarrel with them over opinions, but there are people that are strong in faith. And if there are differences in opinions, we can privately, discuss those opinions with them.
Yeah. That's some of the best discussions I've ever had. When I get to discuss the Scripture with people who have also studied it. I see some of you nodding your heads. Those are good discussions. Notice in verse David.
The God of the Old Testament is the God of the New Testament.
Uh-huh.
And we look at God tolerating. Look at what God tolerated through Israel. The same God tolerates us. And what the word tolerate means, there could be error. There could be weakness. The weaker brother is tolerated. And I think that's where the stronger brother has a great attribute. That he or she can tolerate. Grace, tolerate, is a tough thing to define. But looking at God's example of what he tolerated is just unbelievable.
Yeah. That's well said, Danny.
I think this whole thing becomes difficult because we live in a Western society that says, I'm going to be right regardless. Don't tell me, and even if it's something different, I'm right and you're wrong. So it's hard sometimes to deal with that dichotomy of that.
And that's not a new thing, right? I mean, that's something that's been around since the start of the Campbell Stone movement, and even before that. But we really see it in the Campbell Stone movement in Western society. You don't like my opinion? I'm going to go start this group instead. Kind of lost track there, right? Ron?
I'm going back to that continuum.
Mhm.
Several people, past few weeks, talked about love. And you can put love in other ends to the word humility.
Yeah.
I put humility because I feel humility is the action of love. And like you were saying, you and I talked about a lot of things, and I feel I could talk to you about scriptural matter, and matter of opinion does make a difference. And we could relate because we have a relationship. The preacher I mentioned was telling me about the dangers of coffee.
Yeah.
I knew we could not connect.
Right.
So that's why I chose to walk away.
Right. You didn't even have a relationship with that guy, did you?
No.
And that says a lot too. Vicki?
Delivery, I think, is something like I haven't heard anybody say. And when we're having a conversation with someone, whether it's your kid or your parent or your best friend or delivery is really important. Facial expressions, and you know, sometimes someone will say something to me, and I want to.
That's why I laughed when you said facial expressions.
Yes. But somebody will say something to me and I'll want to bite back. And I, myself personally, have to watch everything. My body language, my facial expressions, my everything. So there's an atheist at work, and he and I have had some very, very good conversations. And I don't warrant what he says, but he has his scientific information. I don't come back and go, well, your scientific information is dumb. I listen to him. I let him say what he needs to say. And then if I need to, I'll ask mom or I'll study, you know, what I need to study and come back and give him mine, kind of like your friend and yourself. We have this situational, you know, conversations, and he keeps coming back to me, and we keep having conversations, which I'm really glad for, but I would like to think the reason that he's coming back having these conversations is because I'm not being a jerk. Yeah. And I'm doing things and saying things in kindness, but I'm saying factual things and not using my opinion.
Yeah.
Because we have to be careful. I said it last week, we have to be careful of reading the word and making the word our own opinion. And a lot of times we do that, and that's what we get mad about. We want the Bible to say this to warrant something that we've done that we're trying to make ourselves feel better for.
Yeah. And whenever we twist the Bible to make it say what we want to say, we're no longer worshiping God, we're worshiping ourselves. So here's the, we didn't get very far, and that's okay. I didn't think we would. We'll finish up with that idea in verse 2 next week. But as we do, I would like for you to think about what the difference is between pleasing others and being a people pleaser. And then consider which one of those Paul was. So, what's the difference between pleasing others and being a people pleaser, and which one was Paul? And that's where we'll start next week. I appreciate all the discussion. This has been great today. If we were doing this for the whole book of Romans, we probably would be here for 5 years. So thank you all. Have a good worship.